I often catch myself thinking about how different my life could have been if my parents hadn't divorced when I was 7. Back then, I was just Albina Rossetti, an ordinary child living with my mom and dad in a cozy home they had bought together. Those early years remain in my memory as a time of serene happiness, warm family dinners, weekend trips to the park, laughter echoing through the rooms, and bedtime stories read by both parents in turn. I thought it would always be that way. But one day, everything changed. My parents announced they were getting a divorce. I remember my father packing his suitcase and kissing the top of my head before leaving. He left us the house, cared for it from afar, and continued paying child support. Financially, my mom didn't struggle. She didn't even have to work. It seemed like she was fine with that. A year later, my mom met Demetrio. He seemed like a kind man. Every time he came over, he brought sweets and told jokes to make me smile. But their romance progressed quickly, and soon they were married. My half-sister Bianca was born, and that's when everything began to change. Demetrio stopped being the warm, good-natured person I had initially remembered. His looks grew colder, as if my presence in the house bothered him. When my mom wasn't around, he would make ambiguous remarks. "Don't you miss your dad?" Or, "Maybe you'd be better off living with him." I was 12 when I overheard a conversation that turned my world upside down. One night, I went downstairs to get a glass of water. I froze on the staircase, hearing hushed voices. Demetrio was talking to my mom. "Sarah, I got a promotion. My salary has nearly doubled. You won't need to work. And we won't need Albina's child support anymore." "But that money helps," my mom replied, hesitating. "Sarah, let's be honest. Albina would be better off with her father. Besides, wouldn't it be nice to focus on our family? On Bianca?" I heard my mom sigh before she answered. "You're right. I'll call Orlando tomorrow." I stood there in the dark, my hand over my mouth to keep myself silent. The glass of water was forgotten. Their words echoed in my head. My mother had agreed to send me to live with my father, as if I were some kind of burden. The next day, she broke the news with feigned care in her voice. "You'll move in with your dad. You'll have more opportunities there," she said, as if doing me a favor. But I knew the truth. She just wanted to get rid of me. My father welcomed me with open arms. He didn't ask too many questions. In his apartment, he gave me my own room, painted it in my favorite color, and filled the shelves with books I loved. That first night, he sat on the edge of my bed and said, "I'm sorry things turned out this way. But remember, you'll always have a home here." Those words became my anchor in a sea of change. My mom barely visited me. Her presence was reduced to the occasional holiday call. My father became everything to me. He supported me in everything, from school plays to my first heartbreaks. When it came time to apply to college, he was there every night, helping me write essays and choose the best universities. Whenever I doubted myself, he reminded me, "You can do anything you set your mind to, Albina." Those moments made me stronger. But deep down, there was a question I was too afraid to ask. Did my mom know I had overheard that night? And if she did she regret it at all? I still remember the day I received my college acceptance letter. My father's eyes filled with tears as he read it. "You did it, sweetheart," he said, pulling me into a tight hug. "I always knew you could." College was expensive, but my father never complained. Whenever I cautiously brought up the subject of money, he'd confidently say, "Your education is my priority." Those words were a constant reminder of his unconditional love. For years flew by like a blink of an eye. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make him proud, and graduated with honors. After graduation, I landed a job at one of the city's top consulting firms. Life began to take shape. I rented a spacious apartment downtown, just a few blocks from my father's home. Every Sunday, we had dinner together. These evenings became an unwavering tradition ever since I had moved in with him. He always asked about my work, and I shared stories about my projects, the challenges I faced, and how I was striving to grow. Sometimes, we simply sat in comfortable silence, watching old movies. It reminded me of the days when I was in high school. Everything seemed perfect until the diagnosis came. Stage 4. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, the doctor said, trying to sound optimistic. But my father lived only 4 years longer. I was 28 when I lost him. The final weeks of his life were unbearable, but I took time off work to be by his side. I spent every minute at the hospital, holding his hand, reading him books, and trying to distract him from the pain. One of those nights, when his breathing became heavier, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "You're the best thing that ever happened in my life, Albina. Never forget that." After his death, I was left alone. He left me everything: his downtown apartment, cozy and full of memories, and $700,000 in savings. But that money meant nothing. All I wanted was to have him back. A month after the funeral, my phone rang. I almost dropped it when I saw the name Mom on the screen. Albina, her voice was quiet and uncertain. "I heard about your father. I'm so sorry." It was the first thing I'd heard from her in years. "Thank you," I managed to say. She hesitated. "I know this isn't the best time, but Demetrio passed away. Recently. A heart attack." Her words hung in the air. "I've been thinking about you a lot," she added after a pause. Perhaps grief had made me vulnerable, or maybe I just wanted to believe that people could change. I agreed to meet her for coffee. One coffee turned into a series of meetings. I started visiting her more often. During this time, I met Bianca for the first time as an adult. She was 21, floating between job interviews and looking lost. My mom, now working as a cashier at a supermarket, was far removed from the days when she didn't have to work at all. My visits became regular. I told them about my life, my work projects, my travels. Each trip became an excuse for gifts: designer clothes for Bianca, nice perfumes for my mom. I enjoyed sharing my success with them. This turned into a kind of routine. Before every visit, I would stop at a mall to pick out something new. I couldn't show up at my mom's house empty-handed. It felt like it was expected of me. Bianca, in particular, reacted with bright enthusiasm. Her eyes lit up every time I pulled something new out of my bag. "Is this really from that boutique in Paris?" she'd exclaim, clutching another designer dress. My mom thanked me too, but more reservedly. She had always been like that, economical with her emotions. I tried to please them. Maybe I was trying to buy the affection I hadn't received as a child. When choosing gifts, I made sure they suited them: a cashmere sweater for my mom, a leather handbag for Bianca. Everything seemed calm and harmonious, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. I looked at my mom, feeling a mix of pity and exhaustion. Her hand resting on mine was warm but frail. That touch awakened something long buried, almost childlike, like in those days when I could still believe she would always be strong and protective. "How serious is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mom lowered her gaze, as if she couldn't meet my eyes. "The doctor says we need to act quickly. If I don't have the surgery soon, I might end up disabled. I won't be able to work anymore." Her words echoed in my head. I remembered my father and how helpless I'd felt watching him suffer. The memory burned through me, leaving only a bitter aftertaste. "How much will it cost?" I asked, already knowing the answer. My mom looked at me with gratitude, as if I had already agreed. "With the surgery and rehabilitation, about 40,000. I know it's a lot, but I don't know where else to turn. I felt something hot and uncontrollable boiling inside me. It was as if the money my father had left me had become an invisible thread tying me to her problems. And yet I couldn't shake the thought that her voice sounded too calculated, as if she knew exactly which buttons to press. "Is it really urgent?" I asked. "Yes," my mom replied, her voice trembling slightly. Bianca stood nearby, her face serious but her eyes slightly narrowed, as if she was waiting for something. "Albina, this isn't just about Mom. You understand that she's the only one supporting us, right?" she began. "If she can't work, what will we do?" I looked at her. There was something almost accusatory in her voice, as if all of this were my fault. "I'll think about it," I said curtly, standing up. My mom mumbled something, but I was already heading toward the door. At home, I couldn't find peace. The word think became an unbearable weight. $40,000 was just a fraction of what I could afford without much effort. But every time I tried to imagine myself signing a check or transferring the money, an image of my father appeared in my mind, his tired yet loving face, his words, "This money is for you, Albina. You've earned it." But what had my mom earned? And did she really need the surgery so urgently? Or was this just another way to pull me back into her web of demands? The next day, I went to the clinic to verify her story. I tracked down the doctor mentioned in her paperwork and had no trouble arranging a meeting. The doctor was polite and attentive. "Yes, the surgery is indeed necessary," he said, flipping through her files. "Her knee joint is severely damaged. If we don't replace it in the next few months, the situation could become irreversible." His words sounded convincing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. "Are you sure it's urgent?" I pressed. The doctor paused for a moment, then shrugged slightly. "We recommend doing the surgery as soon as possible to avoid further complications. But of course, the decision is up to the patient." Those last words sounded as though he was trying to be honest but wasn't entirely certain. A few days later, I returned to my mom's house. She was sitting in the same position as when she first told me about her problem. "I'll pay for the surgery," I said, sitting down across from her. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. "Thank you, Albina. You have no idea how much this means to me." But something inside me still wouldn't let go. "There's just one condition," I added, trying to keep my voice firm. "I want to see all the bills and contracts. I'll handle the payments myself." My mom froze, her smile faltering slightly, but she quickly composed herself. "Of course, dear, whatever you say." Bianca, who had been standing in the corner of the room, pressed her lips together but said nothing. In the following weeks, I took charge of organizing the surgery. I oversaw every step, from the clinic paperwork to paying all the fees. My mom dutifully provided the documents, and Bianca continued to look at me with a kind of silent reproach that I tried to ignore. The surgery was a success. My mom recovered quickly, and her gratitude was almost touching. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I would have to fight for my own boundaries, for the right to be myself, and to ensure that the money my father had left me wouldn't become another thread tying me to a past I so desperately wanted to escape. I couldn't believe my eyes. Every photo that appeared on my phone was like a slap in the face. Here was my mom, looking perfectly healthy, in a bright summer dress, posing in front of the Trevi fountain. In another picture, Bianca was taking a selfie outside a Prada boutique in the heart of Rome. The next photo, Aunt Angela and her daughter Emma laughing by a private pool, the water reflecting sunlight onto the marble walls of a luxurious villa. The timestamps on the photos were from yesterday. Everything was clear, impossible to mistake. "Rosaria, are you sure this is all real?" My voice trembled as I scrolled through the images. "Albina," her voice was cautious yet firm. My sister told me Bianca sent these photos herself. She didn't seem to think anyone would tell you. I heard Rosaria sigh before continuing. Look, I don't know what they're thinking, but this doesn't look good. I nodded silently, even though she couldn't see me. After the call, I sat on the couch for a long time, holding my phone. Fragmented thoughts raced through my mind, each one sharper than the last. Those $40,000 I had already transferred were meant for the surgery. To save her health. To help her get back on her feet, not to go strolling through villas in Italy. I tried to recall everything she had said. How she had pleaded, how she'd looked at me with those sorrowful eyes. There hadn't been a single hint of deceit in her voice. But the photos told a different story. I opened my messenger and dialed Bianca's number. The ringing felt endless. Finally, she picked up, her voice cheerful, even excited. "Hey, Jess," she began. "How are you? Where are you right now?" I tried to keep my tone even, though everything inside me was boiling. We're in Messina," she said after a slight hesitation. "Really?" I struggled to hold back the sarcasm. "Because in the photos you sent to Rosaria's daughter, you're not in Messina. You're in Rome." A pause. Seconds of silence. I heard her take a sharp breath. "You don't understand," she began defensively. "We just decided to relax a little before the surgery. It's good for Mom, you know, to reduce stress before the procedure." "Bianca, do you think I'm stupid?" I interrupted coldly. "I've seen everything. The villa, the restaurants, the boutiques. You bought one-way tickets. What surgery are you even talking about?" I heard her mumble something before finally replying. "Look, I'm not going to discuss this. You can afford the money. It's not the end of the world." My pulse quickened. "This isn't about the money, Bianca," I said, trying not to lose control. "It's about trust. You lied to me." I heard her scoff. "Lied to you? You've always been so self-righteous, Albina. Maybe you need to loosen up. We just took what you could give." "I won't give you anything ever again," I whispered. "Well, that's your choice." Her voice turned icy. She hung up. I sat in silence, feeling the emptiness inside me grow, filling every corner. My phone rang again. My mom's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. The next morning, I went to the bank. They assured me the money I had transferred was already spent. Getting it back would be impossible. The manager's words sounded like a verdict. "If this was fraud, you could file a police report," she suggested cautiously. The police? Accuse my own mother of fraud? Even the thought of it felt impossible. I sat in my car parked outside the bank, gripping the steering wheel. Outside, life carried on as usual. People rushed about their business, unaware of how someone's world could fall apart in a matter of moments. My phone vibrated again. This time, it was a message from my mom. "Albina, it's not what you think. Please, let me explain." I didn't reply. Instead, I removed her number from my favorites. Another day passed. I began to feel my anger giving way to exhausting weariness. I couldn't think about anything except the betrayal. The image of my mom smiling in front of the Trevi fountain haunted me wherever I went. That evening, as I sat at the table with a cup of cold tea, my phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. I picked it up, not knowing what to expect. "Albina, it's Aunt Angela." Her voice was slightly shaky, but more confident than I had expected. "We need to talk," she said. I didn't have time to ask her questions. She continued. "This isn't just about the villa. It's much more complicated. You need to know the truth." I stopped reaching out. Let them sweat it out, I thought, watching the situation unfold. Conflicting emotions raged inside me. On the one hand, I was furious at the audacity of their lies. On the other, every time I pictured them lounging at a luxurious villa or strolling through designer boutiques, I felt bitterness. This wasn't just anger. It was betrayal that struck at the core, at trust. 3 days passed. Not a single call. Not a single message. I imagined my mom and Bianca sitting somewhere, discussing what to do next. They probably didn't expect me to stop calling. Maybe they thought I was upset but would soften eventually. On the 4th day, I decided to make an unexpected move. I called the Italian hospital where the surgery was supposedly taking place. It turned out to be surprisingly easy. The staff, who spoke decent English, were willing to help. "No, we can't find a patient with that name," the receptionist said politely after a thorough check. "Are you sure? Could she be registered under a different last name?" I pressed, even though I already knew the answer was true. "I'm sorry, but we have no records matching the information you've provided." I thanked him and hung up. Anger boiled inside me like an avalanche, ready to erupt. Now I had proof of their lies. That evening, my phone finally rang. The name Mom lit up on the screen like a warning sign. I pressed the green button, feeling a strange mix of triumph and bitterness. "Albina, sweetheart, you stopped calling," my mom began with a plaintive tone in her voice. I started to worry. "Really?" My voice was cold, even to myself. "Were you worried about me while strolling through Rome or posing in front of the Trevi Fountain?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Who told you?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. "It doesn't matter who. What matters is that I know. And you know what, Mom? I don't just know. I checked with the hospital in Messina. They've never heard of you." "Albina, you don't understand," she began, but I didn't let her finish. "No, Mom, you're the one who doesn't understand. You think you can use me over and over again, like a walking wallet? You lied about your health. You played on my memories of Dad. How could you?" "It was a mistake," she mumbled, but I couldn't hold back my anger anymore. "A mistake? This isn't a mistake, Mom, it's a con." My voice trembled. "You knew I'd help if it was about your health, and you used that." We needed a break," she finally admitted, her voice sounding broken. "Everything has been so hard. After Dimitrio's death, we lost so much. We just wanted to live a little. At my expense, I finished for her." "You can afford it," Bianca interjected, her voice coming from the background. "You're rich. And us? We've been trying to survive." "Survive? In a villa in Rome?" I let out a bitter, joyless laugh. My mom whispered something to Bianca, likely trying to get her to stop talking, but she couldn't hold back. "You live in luxury, Albina. And it's all thanks to Dad's money. We're his family too. Wouldn't he have wanted you to take care of us?" I paused for a moment, unable to believe what I was hearing. "You weren't family to my father," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He would never have allowed anyone to treat me this way." "Then do what he couldn't," Bianca said. "Help us." I laughed, bitter and hysterical. "Don't you get it? This isn't help. It's exploitation. And you're not getting anything else from me." The line went silent. Then my mom whispered, "You can't do this to us. We're your family." "Family?" My voice trembled. "You gave me away to my father like I was some unwanted item so you could live your life. And now you're calling me family again because I can pay your bills?" She didn't respond. "I want you to return at least part of the money," I said, feeling my heart tighten with pain. If you don't, I'll have no choice but to go to the police. You wouldn't do that, my mom said quietly. Try me. I hung up, feeling my hands shake from the tension. I didn't know how this would end, but I knew one thing: I wouldn't let them use me anymore. My voice had been firm and cold, like a blade slicing through the thick silence on the other end of the line. This is your problem, not mine. My mom went silent, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. Her stunned silence lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough for me to feel something shift inside. It was a strange and bitter sensation, a mix of relief and finality. Albina, sweetheart, you can't just leave us like this, she said, her voice trembling as though she was trying to find the right words, but it still sounded false. Leave you? I scoffed, though my laugh was dry and devoid of joy. You already left me once, Mom. Remember? That was different, she blurted out. I was thinking of what was best for you then. You were better off with your father. He had everything you needed. And now? I asked, feeling a wave of long-suppressed anger rising within me. Are you thinking about what's best for me now? When you're trying to use me, deceive me, and manipulate me? Albina, don't be so cruel, Bianca cut in, her voice sharp and irritated. We're just trying to live. You don't understand what it's like to feel like nobody when people like you are around. People like me? I asked, feeling my anger turn into icy contempt. You mean people who work for what they have? Who don't lie to their loved ones just to afford another fancy dinner? You just don't get it. Bianca shouted. No, you're the one who doesn't understand, I replied quietly but firmly. Everything I have, I've earned. And everything you have, you've gotten by manipulating other people's emotions. We're your family, my mom almost whispered. You can't just turn your back on us. I felt something inside me break, not because of her words, but because I realized that nothing I said would change anything. They didn't want to understand. Family? I repeated, as if testing the word. It tasted bitter, like vinegar. You gave up the right to call yourself my family the day you sent me to live with my father for your own convenience. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. I'm not giving you another penny, I finally said. If you need to get back on your feet, sell the villa. Or your designer purchases. That's not my problem. Albina, wait, my mom began, but I had already pressed the button to end the call. The next few days, I felt as though I'd escaped a trap. The phone was silent, as if it had finally grown tired of their complaints and demands. For the first time in years, I felt something close to freedom. But that freedom was tinged with bitterness. Every night, I found myself asking the same question: how could I have let them hurt me again? Hadn't the past taught me to be more careful? On the fourth day after that conversation, I received a letter. This time, it came in a plain envelope with a French stamp. The handwriting on it was familiar, though slightly shaky. It was my mom's. I hesitated for a long time before opening it. Conflicting emotions fought inside me, fear that it would be another request and hope that maybe, just maybe, she had finally understood. Inside were several pages written in uneven handwriting. Dear Albina, I know our relationship hasn't been perfect, and I've made so many mistakes. Perhaps you'll never forgive me, and I don't dare hope for that. But I want you to know. I couldn't finish reading the letter. Her words, instead of bringing comfort, only irritated me. It all felt like empty excuses. I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer, deciding I'd read it later. Maybe in a month. Or maybe never. A week after receiving the letter, I got a notification from the bank. My mom had tried to make a transaction from my account. She was still linked to one of my old cards that I had once given her for necessary expenses. I immediately blocked the card. That was the final straw. I deleted their numbers, blocked all possible ways for them to contact me, and finally felt empty. But that emptiness was better than the pain they kept inflicting, time after time. After a conversation with my grandmother, I stood by the window for a long time, watching the evening sun sink below the horizon, leaving a fiery pink trail behind it. The silence of the apartment was soothing. This was my space, my life, my fortress, where I no longer felt the need to justify myself or prove my worth. I returned to the table, where a stack of travel brochures lay. Greece. Every image on the pages called to me: the whitewashed houses perched on Santorini's cliffs, the azure waters of the Aegean Sea, the ancient columns of the Parthenon. Once, I might have thought about how to share such a trip with someone else, with a family that had always felt like an unattainable dream. But now I knew my life didn't require the approval or participation of those who only knew how to take without giving anything in return. Instead, I focused on myself. Months passed. I went to Greece, and the trip became something more than just a vacation. It was a symbol of freedom. I wandered through the narrow streets of Athens, sat by the sea with a cup of coffee and a notebook, jotting down my thoughts. At some point, I realized that, for the first time in a long while, I felt truly happy. The world was vast, full of possibilities, and I had finally allowed myself to see it that way. My grandmother called occasionally to share updates. Her voice was warmer than ever, as if she sensed that I had grown stronger than before. "Your mom is still angry," she said one day, unable to suppress a sigh. She and Bianca had another fight. This time about the money Bianca spent on new designer clothes instead of paying rent. I listened silently, feeling nothing but a faint sense of pity. "Grandma," I interrupted her gently, "I don't want to hear about them anymore." "I understand, dear," she replied. And in that moment, I felt that, for the first time, I had truly let go. I started writing. Not for publication or recognition, but for myself. Echoes of the past crept into my stories, but not as pain, rather, as a realization of how those experiences had helped me grow and become stronger. In one of my stories, I wrote, "Some people come into our lives to teach us the importance of setting boundaries. They teach us through pain and betrayal, but their lessons do not have to define us forever. We can choose who we want to be, and that choice is always ours to make." These words became my mantra. Time passed. Work brought me joy, friends supported me, and traveling continued to inspire me. Every new city, every new face reminded me how much wider and brighter the world was than the one I had left behind. My mom and Bianca occasionally surfaced in my memories, like a distant noise that grew fainter over time. I knew their lives remained full of chaos, just as before. They were still playing their games, but now I was no longer part of their circle. One evening, after coming home from work, I found a letter in my mailbox. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar, my mom's uneven script. I stared at it for a long time, hesitant to open it. In the end, I left the letter on the table. It sat there for a week, then two. Each time I walked past it, I felt a stir of something inside, but I didn't rush to pick it up. Perhaps it would remain unopened. Sitting on the balcony of my apartment, I watched the evening sky shift its colors. A warm cup of tea heated my hands, and my father's words echoed in my mind. "You were the best thing in my life, Albina. Never forget that." I hadn't forgotten. Those words had become my anchor and my compass. They helped me realize that I deserved love that didn't require sacrifices or bargains. Now, I knew I no longer needed to look back. The world was mine, and I was ready to take everything it had to offer. I opened my laptop and began planning my next trip.